My name is Julia Cox. Standing on the balcony of a luxury resort in Miami Beach, I never thought my heart could ache this much as I gazed at the sea at dusk. The one-week vacation, meant to be a time for making memories with family, turned into a nightmare because of my sister-in-law, Diana. I have been happily married to Stephen for 10 years. Both of us, as executives at major corporations, have put in a lot of effort to get to where we are today. Choosing not to have children was a natural decision for our lifestyle. 3 major vacations a year and a few weekend trips. That was the rhythm of our life. For a few years now, we have been inviting Stephen's parents to our annual family trip. Stephen's father, Douglas, 76 years old, was gradually deteriorating in health, and his mother, Harriet, 70 years old, was struggling alone with his care. This year's trip had a special meaning. Douglas wanted to revisit Miami, where he and Harriet had gone on their honeymoon about 50 years ago. His voice carried a sense of urgency, as if this might be his last chance. I did not hesitate to offer to cover all the expenses. It was a high cost, but seeing their happy faces was worth more than that. After all, they had accepted me as their own daughter for the past 10 years. However, everything began to change when Diana, 38 years old, a stay-at-home mom with 3 children, expressed her wish to come along. Her financial situation was tough, and her husband's income barely covered the basic living expenses. Every time we shared photos from our vacations, she would sigh and say, "I haven't had a decent vacation." Because she was family, I agreed to cover her expenses as well. Looking back, this might have been my first mistake. From the moment we arrived in Miami, Diana's attitude was clearly off. The first sign of trouble surfaced just a few hours after we checked into the beach resort. "Julia, would you mind taking our picture?" "I want one with just my family," she said. Her words cut through my heart like a blade of ice. It felt like the bonds I had built with my family over the past 10 years were instantly negated. Stephen looked perplexed but kept silent, not wanting to spoil the atmosphere. But this was just the beginning. Diana found one opportunity after another to exclude me. Photos at tourist spots, seating arrangements at restaurants, gatherings by the poolside. She treated me like an outsider in every scenario. The incident on the boat tour was even more blatant. The small boat, designed with 2 rows of 2 seats each, was perfect for a family of 4. With 5 people, someone had to ride on a different boat. Diana quickly implemented her plan, arranging for her parents to sit in the first row, and secured the seat next to Stephen for herself. This setup is perfect for a family photo, isn't it? As a result, I ended up riding alone among strangers in the next boat. They also bought a commemorative photo of their family on the boat, and that photo is now on Diana's social media feed. The commemorative photo from the boat remains as a symbol of the most unforgettable impression of my vacation experience. While my husband and his family were creating perfect memories without me, I was awkwardly mingling with strangers. And the situation progressed in yet another direction. Diana gradually began to awaken to the luxurious services of the resort. Her initially modest attitude became bolder day by day. An especially painful event occurred at the upscale seafood restaurant I had reserved weeks in advance for this trip. I had secured a table with a perfect view of the sunset at Miami's finest waterfront restaurant. Upon arrival, the hostess led us to a round table for 6, perfectly positioned to soak in the golden hour light over the ocean. Stephen and I were supposed to sit together and enjoy the view, with his parents across from us. Diana, who had joined at the last minute, should have been fine with a side seat. However, before we could sit down, Diana quickly took the seat next to Stephen and seated her parents in the best position to see the sunset. I was relegated to the worst seat near the waiter station, with my back to the sunset. This treatment towards me, who had specifically planned this dinner, prompted Stephen to stand up and suggest changing the seating arrangement. But Diana snapped at him and tried to remind everyone that this was a family trip. As the evening wore on, dinner only got worse. I tried to join the conversation and find common ground, But Diana had other plans. Every time I tried to participate, she deliberately steered the conversation to topics like childhood memories, high school adventures, and family inside jokes. Even when Stephen and his parents tried to draw me into the conversation, Diana quickly changed the subject. However, what concerned me more was the way she ordered. She chose the most expensive wine on the menu and ordered from appetizers to desserts without any regard for the price. "Since it's a family trip, let's make it a memorable meal," she said. Her words had a challenging ring to them. Diana's behavior only worsened, and she soon started using the room charge system linked to my credit card, as if it were an unlimited shopping card. Luxurious treatments at the high-end spa, impulse purchases at designer boutiques, and premium champagne by the poolside. She piled on lavish requests one after another. When ordering, she never once mentioned the cost. It was as if it were natural for me to pay. "This massage is really wonderful. Maybe I'll book another for tomorrow. This boutique has such lovely dresses. I need to get souvenirs for the kids too. For dessert tonight, Dom Perignon would be perfect." Her spending clearly exceeded her usual standard of living. But seeing how happy Stephen's parents were, I couldn't stop her right then. One night, when Stephen and I were alone, he looked worried and spoke to me. "Diana's charges are going to be quite high." "Yes, I know," I answered. "But seeing your dad having a good time." That night, I made a decision. On our last morning in Miami, I suggested to Stephen, "Take your parents to the airport first. Diana and I will go later." Stephen seemed to immediately understand my intention. "What are you planning?" "Don't worry. I promise to stay neutral as I've been." He nodded slightly. It was enough of a concession for him, who had watched his sister deliberately exclude me all week. I headed to the front desk with a carefully prepared strategy. The hotel's billing system was convenient for me. The room charges were prepaid, but all additional expenses incurred during the stay were settled at checkout. This included all room service orders, all spa treatments, and all the poolside cocktails that Diana indulged in. I requested the hotel manager to separate the bills for tax purposes. The male manager complied with me without hesitation, as it was a standard procedure. As the process continued, I stood there watching the bills being separated. I couldn't help but think that Diana had never once considered the emotional or financial consequences of her actions. After settling the payments for Stephen's parents' suite and our room, I waited for the moment. My parents-in-law had already headed to the airport, needing extra time due to Douglas's health and wheelchair requirements. Only Diana and I were left in the hotel lobby. The manager called her to the accounting counter. I could see the color draining from Diana's face. She was frozen, staring at the itemized bill handed to her. The total amount was astonishing, likely equivalent to several months of her usual expenses. Her eyes moved back and forth between the bill and my face. As she grasped the reality, confusion turned into panic. "You're not paying for me." I kept my composure. "I've already paid for the family. You need to pay for your own part." Diana, trembling, handed her credit card to the manager. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your credit card has been rejected." The manager's words confirmed the outcome I had anticipated. She had lived a luxurious life, far beyond her income for a week, assuming I would cover the costs. The manager tried her card again, but the result was the same. Her credit limit did not even reach half of the accumulated charges. The women's spa sessions and the special dinner had finally caught up with her payment capabilities. And this time I, whom she thought of as an ATM, did not come to her rescue. For the next 30 minutes, the hotel lobby was like a theater. Diana paced back and forth, trying to figure out how to deal with this unexpected crisis. Every few minutes, she threw desperate glances at me, clearly waiting for me to offer to pay, but I remained seated on the plush sofa in the lobby, outwardly calm. I knew I could end her plight with a swipe of my card. Had she apologized for her behavior during the trip, I might have done so. However, Diana's pride did not allow her to take that step. Finally, she made the inevitable phone call. I could hear her explaining the situation to her husband. The amount she had accumulated was nearly equivalent to her husband's monthly salary. From the other end of the phone, her husband's voice leaked through, questioning why she had made such reckless expenditures. After long negotiations and likely desperate promises, a transfer was finally arranged to cover the bill. On the taxi ride to the airport, Diana was silent, probably thinking about her husband's reaction upon her return. However, her troubles were not over yet. Upon arrival at the airport, with departure time looming, she realized she had not yet checked in for her flight. While I slipped through priority check-in, Diana had to stand in the long regular queue to check her bags. As time passed, she grew increasingly irritated. At the gate, I quietly arranged an upgrade to business class for myself, Stephen and his parents, ensuring a comfortable end to our journey. Meanwhile, Diana remained in her original economy seat. Her expression as she passed the spacious business class seat said it all. She didn't speak a word, but her clenched jaw and stiff posture spoke volumes about her feelings throughout the flight. While we enjoyed the premium services, she spent her time in the economy class. The moment we landed, Diana's composure finally shattered. She rushed to where her parents were collecting their luggage and began to recount her version of the events. According to her dramatic narrative, I had forced her to pay, humiliated her in public, and intentionally excluded her from the flight upgrade. She conveniently omitted the part where she had spent a week harassing me, trying to exclude me from every moment with the family. Douglas, visibly weary from the trip, became noticeably distressed as her performance continued. Even at that moment, she was not concerned about her father's health. She was too consumed with portraying herself as the victim. Throughout Diana's dramatic performance, I maintained my composure. Waiting for the right moment, I quietly began to speak. I detailed how she had systematically excluded me from every family moment during the vacation. Family-only photos, manipulated seating arrangements, intentionally exclusive conversations, all funded by me. The reason was simple. If she didn't consider me family enough to include in the memories, why should she expect me to pay for her as family? Harriet intervened, halting Diana's performance abruptly. After observing her daughter's behavior for a week, she had reached her limit. "Diana, that's enough," she said firmly. "We don't want to be involved with your theatrics. We noticed you've been pushing Julia away all this time. We tried to include her, but you had your own plan to sideline her." Instead of accepting responsibility, Diana began to attack more fiercely, revealing her true nature. "You use money to control the family," she accused me, then turned to Stephen. "Your wife teamed up with you to humiliate me. How can you be so cruel to your own sister?" She raised her voice. "Do you see what this woman does to you? You can't do anything. You're tied to her money." Her baseless accusations provoked a fierce reaction from Stephen, turning the baggage claim area into a stage for family drama. If not for Douglas's presence, the situation might have escalated further. Douglas, who had maintained a dignified silence throughout the trip, said to Diana in a soft voice, "Julia has done enough for us, and you as a daughter-in-law. If you can't be grateful, at least be quiet." His succinct words effectively ended Diana's intense accusations, but the damage to family relations had already been done. After Douglas' words, the airport terminal was enveloped in a heavy silence. His request for us to leave immediately was filled with quiet authority. I promptly helped him to the car, and we departed. Diana was left standing there alone. Despite being 70 miles from home, her pride prevented her from asking for a ride in our car. She had come to the airport with us and hadn't brought her own car. The taxi fare was obviously going to be exorbitant, but after a week of Diana intentionally excluding me, I no longer cared. The ride home to my in-laws' house was quiet. Upon arrival, both expressed their heartfelt gratitude for the vacation. Douglas's hug was longer than usual and held more meaning than words could convey. We avoided talking about what had happened for a while, but a few days later, Stephen finally broke the silence. He revealed that Diana was facing serious financial difficulties. Her husband was furious about having to clean up after his wife's haughty behavior. He demanded full repayment and refused to bail her out for her extravagant expenses. Diana struggled to manage both the repayment and her regular credit card payments. Stephen supported my actions but gently suggested that I might have gone a bit too far. However, he admitted that his sister needed this wake-up call. For years, Diana had taken advantage of others' generosity, treating it as her due. It felt like long-needed justice that she finally faced the consequences of her actions. If Stephen were to ask me if I regretted my decision, I could honestly answer no. The most effective lessons sometimes come with the highest costs. Diana chose her own consequences. When I shared my experience online, there were mixed reactions. Some people said I was too harsh and argued that I should have borne the cost for the sake of family peace. But I know my worth. I refused to be treated like a doormat, silently accepting her treatment of me while still funding everyone's lavish vacations. I refused to be just an ATM or servant for Diana. All I wanted was basic respect and inclusion in family activities. Even after everything was over, if she had acknowledged her actions and apologized, I might have covered her expenses. But for her, pride was more important than making things right. The truth is, Diana and I were never close. Our relationship consisted of polite greetings at family gatherings when she visited. For years, there had been no real connection or meaningful conversation. Still, when she asked to join the vacation, I agreed to cover her travel expenses simply because she was family. That generosity should have warranted at least a basic level of respect. Instead, it seemed to fuel her resolve to exclude me even more. Diana's husband was still outraged that he had to use savings to cover her spending spree. Naturally, no working person would be pleased to see their hard-earned money disappear because their spouse decided to play princess for a week using someone else's money. Instead of accepting responsibility for her actions, Diana resorted to her usual tactic. She crafted a narrative where she was the victim and I was the villain, deliberately humiliating her. During preparations for the Christmas party, while my mother-in-law was planning a special celebration, my father-in-law's deteriorating health was used as a reason by Diana's husband to refuse attendance, ruining the plans. But the real reason was, I can't bear to sit at the same table with someone who humiliates financially weaker people. At that moment, my mother-in-law finally reached her limit and sat him down to reveal the full extent of Diana's behavior during the trip to Miami. She told him to look at the vacation photos to see the truth for himself. The evidence was in Diana's social media posts. There were numerous photos showing me intentionally excluded, pushed to the back of the camera, or seated away from everyone else. The visual record of her intentional exclusion of me was undeniable. My mother-in-law explained that she and my father-in-law had tried repeatedly to include me, but Diana kept coming up with new ways to push me aside. What made it especially difficult was that I had always respected Diana's husband. We were not close friends, but our interactions at Christmas parties and other holiday events had always been enjoyable and respectful. I had never once looked down on him because of his economic situation or any other reason. Such thoughts had never even crossed my mind. We were simply trying to support our spouses and contribute as much as we could, having become part of the same family through marriage. The fact that Diana had manipulated her husband into seeing me as a classist villain demonstrated how far she would go to avoid taking responsibility for her actions. What became clear during the vacation in Miami seemed to be just the tip of the iceberg. Diana, having accumulated debts she couldn't pay over a week, started to blame her hardworking husband for not enabling a more lavish lifestyle. My mother-in-law had tried everything to persuade Diana. She advised her daughter, defended her son-in-law, and tried to make Diana understand the unreasonableness of her demands. However, the luxurious experiences during the Miami trip seemed to have awakened something dangerous in Diana. The woman who once claimed to be satisfied with simple family trips became obsessed with pursuing a lifestyle she wasn't getting. The situation had become deeply concerning, and my mother-in-law felt compelled to issue a stern ultimatum. She told Diana that if her actions led to a divorce, she should not expect any support from the family. More importantly, she warned her not to let her father know about the marital troubles. His health would not withstand the stress of seeing his daughter's marriage collapse due to her actions. On the way home from the Christmas party, I reflected on how my well-intentioned invitation had backfired. I remembered a phrase one had seen at the resort. Once you've experienced the luxury of a private island, you'll never want to set foot on a public island again. The same principle applies to someone who has flown business class after years of economy. There's no going back. We inadvertently showed Diana a lifestyle she could not maintain. Now, her husband is paying the price. This whole situation has been a sobering reminder. It's painful to see her unable to pay her bills, but it's equally hard to see how it has completely distorted her values concerning lifestyle standards. Her husband is a decent man who worked hard to provide for his family, yet he is being punished simply because he cannot sustain the temporary luxury she experienced. I can only hope that she regains her sanity before she destroys her marriage in pursuit of a lifestyle she cannot afford.